There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. Got lots to tell you, bookish-wise, and not so much otherwise. It's just been another glorious week. Had a great visit with Kenji, and he's so excited. I think I might have mentioned this last week, but of the many things he's excited about in terms of coming to Canada at the end of April, and if this is news to you, it means you missed last week's Friday Reads. I'm not going to repeat everything, so you can look that up if you wish. His whole life, since he was born, he has lived in apartments, never in a house, so he's quite excited about that. And I have booked duct cleaners. I had to look that up in the dictionary, didn't know what it meant. Duct cleaners, and then house cleaners to clean the new place from top to bottom, and then carpet cleaners. There's carpeting on both sets of stairs, in the basement and the upstairs, and so those will be all cleaned. And then our move-in date, I have booked movers for April 9th. Oh, do you want to see what the outside looks like? Here's a picture. And so that's all been very good, but that's basically been my, aside from doing a pile of great reading and some surprisingly positive reviews, stay tuned, that's what I've been up to. One of the other things I've been up to this week is meeting this week's mystery guest, who I'm so excited about, and the debut novella that's coming out in just a few days' time. Let's check it out. And this week's mystery guest is the Welsh writer Anthony Shapland, joining us from Cardiff, and his debut novella, A Room Above a Shop, is coming out on March 13th. Welcome, Anthony.
Hello.
It's so great to meet you, and I'm just unusually excited about this novella. Tell us about it.
I got the hard copies through. So it's A Room Above a Shop, which I'm really pleased with. Yeah. And I'm actually matching in.
Oh, tell us about your wearing. You're springing a leak, I believe. Tell us what you're wearing there on your bosom.
I'm not sure when this will go out, but we're not long past St. David's Day in Wales, which is our patron saint. And I tend to give my leek, which is the emblem of Wales, along with the daffodil. It gets about a week's wear. So yeah, I thought I'd have it on for today.
And is that an actual leek, or is it?
It's a non-smelly small felt leek. Although we did used to wear full-size leeks in school, which if you imagine the height of the child and the height of the leek, they just used to pull your jumper down. And it's a symbol they were once worn in battle on helmets to mark out the Welsh soldiers. But it's much more peaceful these days.
We have a BookTube, I think it's on all bookish social media, a reading challenge or a readathon invitation to read Welsh literature for the month of March. Yes, as well as Irish literature. Yeah, so you chose a good month for your debut novella to come out. Yeah. Tell us more about it, Anthony.
It grew quite slowly. It's written in quite episodic chapters, but it's about the meeting of two gay men. I hadn't considered it historical fiction until somebody pointed out that the 80s is now historical fiction.
Very
to me, it's recent past, but it's about two gay men who meet at a specific time, and it has as much to do with the time and the specific place, which is South Wales Valleys, that was very isolated. So it's not a metropolitan meeting, it was a rural meeting. And they start to recognize in each other something that they've not seen anywhere else. And they build a kind of fortress, if you like, for a relationship to flourish. So as the story progresses, they've got relative freedom in this one room above a shop in the title, while the rest of the valley, which is quite closed and insular, is claustrophobic. So it's written from some experience. It's not autobiographical, but there was one point when I thought I'm writing kind of me at age 30 and me at age 40 in this. There are pieces I pulled in autobiographically into it, but it's about their flourishing, their growing relationship. But really at the core is the pressure at that time, which was 1987 in Wales, in the UK. We were 20 years on from decriminalisation, but the public opinion or the public pushback, I think at the time there was a poll and 85% of people believed that homosexuality was wrong under any circumstance. And it had grown in the 20 years since 1967. So really, it's at a time when this wasn't just a hidden affair, but these were absolutely hidden lives. And it's about that performance in public and then the relief of that falling away in private. And it's written in these small chapters where we're allowed as a reader into these small nuances of a relationship that's been hidden all the way through.
I'm thinking about, and I am not I'm perhaps more widely read in Welsh literature than your average North American, but I am not widely read in Welsh literature. But I would like to posit something about the closet within the canon, shall we say, of Welsh literature. I'm thinking about writers like Rhys Davies, who I understand was a closeted homosexual, and it never came up in his work. Were you conscious of, or was it part of your inspiration for this novel to write back against that kind of literary closet? If you agree with my very shaky premise at all.
I know you're there, and Rhys Davies, it's so coded within that writing. It's so deeply hidden. And I realized, I think, like, I'm 53, like I've been around the block a few times, but I realized that when I was looking back at my formative years, I realized that there was a lot of things where I would make other people okay. I came out quite late in life, relatively late in life, but even then I was making sure that I was making other people comfortable constantly with who I was and what I was. And I think, along with a lot of people in this last few years, we've reached an age where it's just taken us a long time to get angry, I think, or get. I feel like there's a generation now looking at that era. In Wales, in the UK, there was Section 28, which was suppressing any positive gay literature or gay outlook at all. There was the AIDS epidemic was beginning. There was age of consent debate. All of these things were happening in metropolitan centres. But the news of those changes and the news of those prejudices, they would filter back to where we were, which was in a kind of very isolated community, but without any of the progressive changes in what we were experiencing. So I think it just took me a long time I think I called it quite over dramatically, a collective howl happening at the moment where everybody is looking at that time and trying to see actually what happens when really people were forced to lie, and the effects that have on long-term kind of structures in society are still playing out. And they're playing out in terms of gay men who have families who've come out at age 60 or 70, that it's still rolling. Given I've seen some of the language we saw then, I've seen it coming back, and it felt more important than ever to write it out for myself.
And you said about the pressure did you use the word pressure? But the effect it has on society as a whole, and also the effect it has on the relationship that you're writing about between your two main characters. And tell us a bit more about your two protagonists.
So yeah, we've got not one, but two. And as I said earlier, I realized at one point I had to remember that they weren't both me and make them have a distinct voice. So we have one character, and they're not named, they're given two initials. The first character's just got the initial B. And this was quite a conscious thing because I naming placed them in a certain specific context. So he would be 21 at the age that in 1987 when the novel's written. The second character, M, is 11 years older and has, I think, within B's story, you see somebody who is almost laying the groundwork for leaving, because the choice was then, if you were going to come out, you had to leave where you were. So coming out, being who you were, meant leaving behind who you were as well. So there's a lot more narrative around B about the potential of leaving. Whereas M, the second character, is somebody who's embedded in a way in that community, in that he is a long line of shopkeepers, and the shop of the title is one that he's inherited. So he is much more, not much more of that place, but much more kind of rooted in that place and unable to move outside of those confines. So it does bring up, occasionally through it brings up this slow tension between them and the people outside the shop. Yeah, the performances, you see the strain of the performance, I think, through them both.
Now I've got the Bronski Beat song
Oh,
vibrating
wow.
in my head. The love that you need can never be found at home. Isn't that the lyric?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that song has been referred to by men my age and men younger, and actually a whole new generation finding it. And at one point, I thought, am I just remaking and rewriting this same story, the idea of escape? But I think within Wales, Wales has a very, you'll know that Wales has a very specific country culture separate from England. And I went away to university and I linked coming out with going away myself when I was younger. So the narrative, because the video for Small Town Boy, which was the song, is this kind of lone person on a platform, leaving family, leaving things behind. I was keen within this to not make, while drawing on that, to not make family left behind bad and leaving and coming out good. Like that there was some humanity within each of the characters of the family, which you see really briefly throughout, but it's the community I grew up in. It's close knit, it's supportive, but this is the one thing that they feel that they can't share. It's the one thing that they keep hidden. But everything else that revolves around it just adds to that tension of something unspoken. And then this continual just performance is what it is, that when you're in public, you're a certain way and it becomes so natural to you that it's a switch that comes on and off throughout the novel. When they leave or when they're behind the door, they are themselves.
It sounds right up my alley, and yeah, I remember watching the videos of Small Town Boy in the year before I came out, and it was torturous to watch and
Hmm.
feel those feelings. Would you describe this as a Welsh novel, a gay novel, both, neither? Riff on that, if you will, sir.
Okay, here we go. I saw this question earlier, and a part of me was like, of course it's a Welsh novel. And then another part of me was like, oh, hang on, is it a novel first? And then it's a Welsh. And I thought back, and you'll probably recognize this as well, Sean, that there was a time when you'd go into bookshops and there'd be literature and then there'd be gay interest. And the gay interest shelf, it was almost like they were never allowed over there. They sat on their own, and you outed yourself by even going towards that shelf. And like it was a thing that I would hover nearby when I was young and read something innocuous while my eye was on what was on the gay interest shelf. So this tremendously useful signpost. But I hope that we're at a point when this just goes into literature and is a novel. And then somebody described it to me the other day, and I was deeply flattered, but then deeply troubled by where it put it. But they said, oh, this is like Claire Keegan for gays.
It's a high compliment, but complicated, and
It's
I can
nice.
totally understand why you'd have a
Yeah, it's
complicated
not
reaction.
just for gays, but so it was, yeah, I was very flattered by the Claire Keegan bit. And then I thought, oh, I really hope that gay men read this and identify with it, who may have found similar experiences and will have, however universal that experience, will have a very specific place and time that those things unfolded. So I'm very proud for it to be both a Welsh and a gay novel, but mostly a novel or novella or wherever that ends. Yeah.
I have snooped around online about you, and I understand that you're a curator. Tell us a little bit about that and how much that shows up in the novel, that sensibility, that deep interest in art.
Yeah, sure. So I came through art college. I feel I'm a complete fraud. I'm not really a writer. I came through art college, and art college in the 90s was just a bit of white wall, and they told you they'd see you in 3 years' time. So it did feel like when I was writing, it did always feel like, am I allowed to be in this world? And am I allowed to do this thing? And that's a lot to do with kind of expectation and permissions for yourself. But I think that they use the same bit of my brain. So whether I'm making work or whether I'm looking at the work of other people and making sense of it by joining the pieces, like by connecting narratives or joining stories. Writing at the moment is almost like me making work, me making my own film or painting or whatever I used to do. Some people have said it's tremendously visual, and I think I write in that way. I think I almost land somewhere and then I write out from there. So I'm not a very efficient plotter, but I have to backwards work the plot once I've worked out what the pieces are. But I tend to land in a scene and look around before I do things. Yeah.
Tell us about where are you curating and maybe what are you curating at the moment?
Okay. Yeah. So I set up 27 years ago, I set up an artist-run space called G39, which is in Cardiff. It's almost like an artist-run art centre where we've got a small cinema and a library where we collect art-connected books and broad stuff, but then a gallery space and some studio space. So at the moment, we've got 9 artists who are working with us, and they're responding to a prompt, really, which isn't usually like us, but we're trying to lighten things because at the moment we need some light things as well as
Don't we
close
just?
attention. Yeah, close attention to what's happening, but actually we need to hold together a lot. So we've written a kind of call out to artists we wanted to work with about things that we were looking at the word fan, which comes from the word fanatic, which, fan sounds healthy, like I'm a fan of. Fanatic sounds obsessive and weird. And we were looking at like where people's habitual obsessions or bits of knowledge or things that keep them going, where those take people. So I'm in conversation with 9 artists at the moment about how that translates and what we might bring together as a part of it. Yeah. And it ranges from ritual to an obsession with one pop star. Like it's at either end of this spectrum that keeps us all sane.
I'm going to put you on the spot. What or who are you a fan of, and are you a fanatic about anything?
Oh, that's crafty. This is niche, but in the mid 70s, I saw somebody carving a match on a children's TV program or something, like literally carving a cooking match into a ball and chain that was articulated, and it was tiny. It was like this long. And I've got a bit obsessed with that man who's called Ray Cook and had this 15-minute appearance on TV. But every now and then I'll find him popping up in Popular Mechanics 1979 or in some TV program.
And then one day, because he'd been having difficulty in holding his hammer and chisels, he went to his doctor and was told he had rheumatoid arthritis. Over the last 12 years, it's got progressively worse, until now Raymond even has to wear plastic supports on his wrists because the joints are so weak. But in spite of this, he was determined not to lose his enthusiasm and his ability to create things. Ray, when did you first look at a matchstick and say to yourself, I think I can do something with that?
Found that I had the ability, and I turned to it more when I started getting this arthritis.
And I'm trying to work out where this collection of carvings that he made went. And if he's still alive or his family is, I'm probably on a stalker list because he's on my search histories. And I think there's a book in it, but I'm not sure quite what it is. So I've been stalking this probably 100-year-old man for about a decade now. I did start to track down where they might have gone. And I think at some point, I believe they were in a miniatures museum in Spain. And I was going to go to see. And it's ridiculous. No, he was on TV for about 10 minutes, but I just remembered this one moment really well.
I love that. I absolutely love that. What are you working on now, Ed?
Oh, okay. So this is early days. I've been toying with it for a long time, but I suspect it might be longer, but possibly not, because this book grew. So at one point, this was 60,000 words, and it had to be pared back. I needed to understand both characters, so I wrote a lot more than actually happened. But I'm working on, there are 62 islands around the coast of Wales. Some inhabited, some used to be inhabited, but there's a specific one that has this sort of layer and layer of history. And it's not far from the coast of Wales. It's called Flatholm, but in Welsh it's called Ynys Echni. And it's just got these layers of history underneath it. And I've got 4 characters who inhabit the island in the present day, but with these kind of layers and layers of things happened. It was the island Marconi transmitted to across water. It was a cholera hospital. It was a plague island. It was a farm. It was a burial site for 2 saints in Wales, and like all these bits and pieces layered up on it. But it's close enough to Cardiff for the seagulls to fly over, take away remains to it. But it's this one little patch of land that I think it's got legs.
That sounds incredible. I actually have read a book that was set on a Welsh island called 20,000 Saints by Fflur Dafydd. Have you read that one?
I haven't read. I know of it though.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I reviewed it on my channel. It got me hooked on reading more about Welsh Islands, so that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And part of my brain was thinking, oh, there's been a lot on islands recently. It's been somewhere people have gone, I think, to work out societal structures and relationships. But I haven't been able to put it back and go, no, don't do that. It's been really playing in my mind about how it might work.
For what
It's
it's
not a
worth,
wild island in the middle of nowhere,
that's right. For what
ex-industrial
it's
city.
for what it's worth, this Canadian will send you another very gentle, polite nudge to keep on going with it. It sounds fabulous.
Thank you.
You have some books to recommend.
I do. And I did think I was going to pick all Welsh ones because of this,
That's
but I
right.
had to pick one that I've just read because it's so good. I See Buildings Fall Like Lightning by Keiran Goddard. It's just out in paperback. And he writes relationships in a way that I think is outstanding. I can't remember exactly how many characters. I think there are 5. There wasn't one point when I felt the author intruding. And often when you're writing in 5 different voices, that's quite difficult to do. But I think it's an astonishing piece of writing. I'd recommend it.
I previewed the first chapter and I was completely smitten by it. I just have to get back to it, but a good recommendation.
Oh, it's really worth it as well. As it unfolds, I just read faster and faster. I just wanted to understand this kind of implosion of people is really good. And then it's a Welsh author, but not a Welsh island. The
I think I know what this is going to be. Yes, yes.
Oh,
I'm a big Carys Davies fan, and I haven't gotten to this one yet.
it's superb. I put it up there with Gallen Pike or West. It's so good. And in terms of subtly writing a relationship with the two, I won't give away a lot, but the two main characters almost don't understand what's happening themselves. And you read it, and there's a penny drop moment where you go, oh, that's what this is. It's, I would say, the best so far. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I have a question for you. Do you think she's ever going to write anything set in Wales?
I might see her. She's doing the launch of the paperback is happening, and I may go to that. So that'll be my question. And then I can
Yes.
see.
Yeah, I don't mean it as a criticism. I just lap everything up that she puts out, but it's very noticeable that she hasn't said anything in Wales that I'm aware of.
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And it's quite, although this almost could be, there's historical bits in there about the clearances in Scotland, but it shares territory with Cannan Jones, I think. And then I've got 2 more, but I'll do.
Please go. Do you want to hear about them both?
Okay, they're 2 Welsh ones, and I
Great.
think you'll enjoy them both. So
Oh,
we
and I
got
don't know of either of them, so this is great.
Thomas Morris is from my valley. He's from just down the road, and it's absolutely, I finished it recently, and it's really an amazing read on masculinity and understanding masculinity. And for me, it was like, I know these places, I know the people you're talking about, and it delves into territory that's quite unsettling, but really good. And then Megan Barker, I think, judging from what you've just said about Carys Davies, I think you would really like that.
Oh, lovely.
A Welsh writer comes from a theatre background, but this is I would say, in Max Porter territory, as that kind of careful use of language, extreme emotional journey. It's about grief. It's got dazzling moments of writing in it, but it is about grief. It is a heavy one. But those are I sneaked 4 in.
That is great. I wanted to ask you earlier in the interview, so I'll ask you now. Have you read or come across a Scottish novella that seems to me like it would resonate quite profoundly with yours? It's called The Old Haunts by Allan Radcliffe.
Oh, no. Hang on.
I'm actually editing our long form chat about his book. He was my mystery guest some months ago, and I read the novel, short novel, and I absolutely loved it. That interview will either go up just before this interview or just after, and I think your books would have a very interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's not set back in the 80s, I don't think, but it's set maybe in the 90s. I forget the exact time, but it's really expressing a lot of the same themes and emotions about a gay couple. and grief in that case. So anyway, Anthony, I can't wait to read yours. Will you come back once I have, and we can have a deep dive type of chat about it?
Of course. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to.
This has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Sean.
I have already ordered A Room Above a Shop from Blackwell's. I think you can order it through other online booksellers, North American wide perhaps, but I ordered mine from Blackwell's. Can't wait to get to it. It sounds like such a Sean book, and what a wonderful guest. All right. I was hoping to get 2 videos posted, but I didn't quite get there, but I got one, and it was a zooming in chat with Brian of Bookish earlier in the week. We taped it in January, I think, and it's about straight men. Should they read more fiction? Would it solve some of the problems we're struggling with? Or would it be a futile exercise? You can watch the lively discussion Brian and I had about that. If you paid attention to what I said in the mystery guest chat with Anthony, you will know what the other video is that I didn't quite finish, not even half finished. It's a long conversation. Oh, I guess I will announce that I'm loving the new video software. It's very pricey. It's, I think, $300 American a year. It's called Descript, and I did a 1 month, not a free trial, but just a paid 1 month membership, and I love it. It is making things go so much faster, and it's a very complex piece of software that I'm just grasping the rudiments of. I don't really care about the quality of my videos other than the video is clear, of good quality in the audio, but you might see me dabbling with some of the other bells and whistles that it has. Certainly my Friday reads and Zoom conversations are just a breeze to edit now. I am committed for the long haul. And the timing couldn't be better. My husband, after 3 years, is coming to live with me again, and I might be a little busy. At least I hope I will be. If the video editing can be streamlined a bit, that will be perfect. And once again, a huge thank you to Kathleen in New Mexico, one of my very generous patrons whose recent and very generous donation made this subscription possible for the next year. Thank you so much again, Kathleen. I almost finished 4 books, but I didn't get that close to finishing 4. I did finish 2. So I've got 2 books to tell you about. And also I'm a ways into the 2 books I started to replace them, plus another book to check in on a preliminary basis. And I will be starting one. I have an unacceptably large number of current reads, and so that's just the happy problem that I'll never probably solve ever. I finished Babbacombe. This is the book that I read to Mum by Susan Scarlett, the pen name for Noelle Stretfield. This is my second by her. The first one I read was Clothes Pegs, which I believe was her first published one. She wrote about 10 or a dozen of these from 1939 to 1951. Many people who are aficionados of furrowed middlebrow women's fiction that's been brought back into print say that Babbacombe is indeed her very best, and this was published in 1941. My mom and I both loved it. It's comical, poignant, and the protagonist is just out of school, and she gets a job working in the department store called Babbacombe's, where her father has worked for his whole career. She gets involved in an impossible romance with the department store owner's son, and she doesn't think that it's appropriate to really go out with him because he's of a different class than her, and she's trying to stop him. He's not stalking her, just that he was hopelessly besotted with her and always trying to convince her to let go of that silly class-based morality that they shouldn't date. And plot ensues, and she comes from I would say, lower middle-class family. They don't have very much money, and a lot of kids, the parents, especially the mother, are incredibly well drawn. I just fell in love with all. Oh, and then there's a half niece of the father that comes and lives with the family, and she's awful. She and Beth have to share a room, and there is a rivalry and animosity between them from the beginning that was also delightful to read about. It was delicious to hate this niece, this cousin of Beth's that was in the story as well, and trying to thwart our lovely young protagonist's love affair and whatnot. I just thought this was an absolute delight, and if you aren't sure about women's fiction of this era, start with this and then experiment further, because this was absolutely superb. It's not Jane Austen. I always very irritatingly say If I like the book, that means it's literary fiction. It's beautifully written. Let's say that. It's a very literary style. It's a very light topic. I kept seeing it as a romantic comedy from the 1940s. That's how it was, kind of reads like that. And it's beautiful. I loved it. So there's my romance novel. The first surprising 5-star read of this week's Friday Reads, Babbacombe by Susan Scarlett. The second and final surprising 5-star read of this week's Friday Reads is a mystery novel. I finished reading Dave Carpenter's mystery novel called Luck, a Bill Schmatta mystery. I'm going to be interviewing him about this next week, and I hate mysteries. So will somebody who loves mysteries love this? It's a very good question. I have a good friend who has, just based on a few comments I made to her, ordered it, and we'll see what she says, because she's a mystery aficionado, at least compared to myself. I would also admit that I didn't really care about the mystery, but what I loved about it was the writing was good, the characters were well drawn, and the mystery was interesting, but it was the least interesting part about it. Maybe the insight is, if it's well written and the characters are well drawn, maybe I might enjoy a mystery. And Mom has been urging me to read a Louise Penny novel, because she writes like that apparently. And maybe I will, but I'm not going to make too much space for reading genre fiction. Don't worry, or don't get your hopes up, whatever side of that fence you're on. But this is about, the murder is in Vancouver. 2 old men, separately murdered, but fairly close to each other, but it wasn't one crime scene, it was 2. And a large part of the backstory is set in Saskatoon in 1951. They were murdered in the late 90s or early 2000s. And there was a crime in Saskatoon that they were implicated in, and a whole bunch of people that could have done it, and some hapless police officers and private detectives on the case. And Bill Schmatta is a retired cop in Saskatoon who ends up being quite endearing, and he's really both the lead on the case and the main character. And there's various other characters. A big part of the story involves numismatics, coin collecting, and I found all that quite interesting. I don't find coin collecting very interesting, and if I had to spend an evening in conversation with somebody who was an avid coin collector, I would have trouble staying awake. But it was integrated into this mystery in a delightful way. I think I'll leave my comments at that. There will be a full interview with Dave Carpenter about Luck. I'm taping it next week, but there's about 6 Dave Carpenter videos ahead of this one to edit and post, but stay tuned. I absolutely loved it. I read this one to Mary Jean, and she did too. I have replaced both of those books. I'm reading a new book to Mum and a new book to Mary Jean. I'll give you a preliminary check-in on those. Holy moly, is this one ever starting out great. It's called After Nora by Penelope Curtis. You know what? It shows up so poorly on the screen that I'm just going to put the cover gift, because it's a gorgeous cover. It's a first novel by an art historian. I don't know where she lives now, but she grew up in Glasgow. And she is in her 60s. She has published a lot of art history, a kind of academic art history. And this is really intriguing. I think I told you last week that it is about her grandmother and about her father. And that sounds maybe boring. It certainly sounds like something that could be a failure as a work of fiction, far too thinly disguised as autobiographical fiction, and instead just be an oral history narrative. And it's not. I'm loving it so far. I'm 70 pages in, and Mum is enjoying it too. I haven't Googled these people, and you can Google them, but don't tell me, because I don't want to know what the true story is. I have a feeling that her grandmother was actually perhaps a well-known painter in her day, and that's, the title is Nora, and that's her grandmother. We're in 1925 and so on, and from there on. She leaves her first husband. She meets a guy at a party that she likes far better, who had never been married. They had the same name, so the first chapter's called The Two Herberts or something like that, and it was delightfully confusing which Herbert she was talking to in the chapter and talking about. And she plays with the reader in a really intriguing way, so I knew pretty quickly that this was going to be sophisticated and intriguing in terms of literary fiction. And so she marries the second guy, and there are pictures and newspaper clippings. So there's a newspaper clipping about the divorce that she gets. So you know that you're dealing with real life events, but boy, she gives a lot of fictional nuance to them, and it's an intriguing writing style. There's not a lot of direct dialogue, which is interesting. There's a lot of feeling and curiosity about art and architecture, because her second husband is an architect, and I think he might have been a famous architect. I'm not going to Google it until we finish the book, but there's a lot of her musing on how her paintings fit in with the artistic trends of the day. There's reference to a movement that I'd never heard of, a Unit 1, an artistic group formed in 1933 that involved artists and designers including Paul Nash and Edward Wadsworth. Surrealism and abstraction. And her work is decidedly not that, and she's worried about it and thinking about it in an interesting way, and all that's in here too. So it is really starting out great. I'm intrigued, and I'm so glad that I'm reading a chapter, or some of the chapters are long, so I read half a chapter, but I'm so glad to be reading it at a steady pace. And with Mary Jean, I have started Volume 4 of the Unselected Journals of M.M. Lyon, and it's as good, if not even better, than everything I've read before. It really was making me giggle last night, some of the lines. Just a bare start on it. It'll take us some weeks, because it's longer than the first 3 volumes, and I don't think I need to say anything else, but it's great. For the Irish Readathon, or just Irish Reading Month, I'm not really participating in the Readathon at all, but I'm doing a pseudo-buddy read with Robin, The Story of Lucy Gault by William Trevor. And oh my god, I'm only 16 pages in and I'm completely immersed in the story. What a masterful writer he was. It's set 1921, the time of the Troubles in Ireland. There's 2 eras of the time of the Troubles, right? And it's a retired British Army captain. He's Anglo-Irish. And his British wife and their young daughter. Some of the IRA tried to burn their house one night, so he's staying up all the night, and he saw intruders come another night, and he shot at them and wounded one of the men, and he's really paranoid because he didn't mean to. He just meant to scare them off. He actually makes overtures to the family, offers to pay for medical treatment, prostrates himself in front of the family, and they don't receive him very well. The captain and his family move because it's just getting more and more dangerous to stay. All the surrounding families have left, and that's where I'm at. But, oh, I feel in 16 pages like I deeply know the captain and his daughter Lucy. She doesn't want to go. She's like, I don't know how old she is, 6 or 7 or something. Everything she's ever known is there. And William Trevor immerses the reader so deeply in her consciousness and what's important to her and her yearnings not to leave, her misgivings, her fear, her terror at leaving the only home she's ever known, and how the adults try to pacify her and it doesn't work, and all of that. Both the political atmosphere and the consciousness of this child, Lucy, are incredibly, deeply immersive. Holy smokes, I can't wait to continue with this. All right. Thank God I'm reading women writers to my mom and to Mary Jean, because I'm reading a lot of men this month, but I'm picking the good ones. There's a few men that know how to write well. And here's another one for Irish Reading Month. John McGahern, The Pornographer. I'll be starting. This will be a buddy read with Sonia of An Enthusiastic Reader. This particular novel was her suggestion, but I have been wanting to get to read something else by him since I read his incredible memoir, All Will Be Well. Knocked my socks off, and so I'm very eager to read some of his fiction. Is this really about a pornographer? Okay, it says here, story of a writer down on his luck in Dublin, penning far from erotic tales to make ends meet. Well, that actually sounds comical. Probably not just comical, but I'll be diving into this. All right, life is really beautiful for me, and I hope it is for you. That's my Friday Reads. Thanks for watching.